Once upon a time, there lived a young couple named Epha and Kaydee. Their love was the kind that songs were written about, pure and full of laughter. They had built their home on a foundation of trust and understanding, believing that no storm could shake what they had. But one day, Kaydee's mother came to stay and it changed the whole thing. Mama Kaydee was a force to be reckoned with. A woman with a sharp tongue and an even sharper gaze. She carried herself with an air of authority that made even the boldest men shrink in her presence. From the moment she stepped into their home, the air shifted. At first, it was subtle comments here and there. Epha, is this how you serve food in your father's house? In my day, a wife knelt to offer her husband his meal. Epha would smile politely, brushing it off as harmless tradition. But the remarks grew sharper. Why are you sitting at the table with your husband? A good wife eats after her husband is satisfied. You let Kaydee wash his own plate? Ow! The women of today have no shame. You want to rest? What kind of wife says she is tired? A real woman never complains. Day by day, Mama Kaydee chipped away at Epha's spirit, making her feel like a stranger in her own home. It started with small things, rearranging the kitchen, moving the spice jars out of place, replacing Epha's favorite pots with ones she deemed more suitable. Then came the constant criticisms, sharp as a blade cloaked in honeyed words. Epha, this stew is too watery. Did no one teach you how to cook properly? The living room looks like a market stall. A wife should know how to keep her home presentable. You wake up too late. A good woman rises before her husband, before the sun itself. Each remark, each disapproving glance, pressed into Epha's skin like a needle, tiny wounds accumulating until she could no longer tell where one ended and the next began. She swallowed her frustration, her anger, forcing herself to smile. Kaydee loved her. That was what mattered. He would see how hard she tried, how much she endured. He would stand by her. But Kaydee, he said nothing. He sat at the table as his mother picked apart Epha's meals, nodding absent-mindedly at her suggestions. He listened as Mama Kaydee dissected Epha's housekeeping skills, never once stepping in to defend her. Epha searched his face for something, anything, that told her he saw, that he understood how much this hurt. But his silence was louder than any insult his mother could throw. He would shrug and say, "Mama means well." And so, Epha swallowed her hurt, day after day, until her home no longer felt like hers. "You call this soup?" Mama Kaydee shouted one evening, pushing the bowl away. "My son deserves better. When I was your age, I cooked feasts, not this tasteless excuse for food." Epha bit her tongue. She had tried to be patient, tried to respect her mother-in-law, but Mama Kaydee's criticisms never ceased. She dictated how Epha should clean, cook, and even how she should speak to Kaydee. Epha's once happy home turned into a place of silent suffering. Kaydee, blinded by his love for his mother, took her side. "She's just trying to help," he would say dismissively whenever Epha complained. "Respect her wisdom." One fateful evening, Epha had had enough. After a particularly humiliating dinner where Mama Kaydee insulted her cooking and accused her of being a useless wife, Epha stood up, wiped her hands, and announced, "I am leaving." Kaydee looked up, startled. "Leaving? To where?" "To where I will be valued," Epha said firmly. "Since I am not a good wife in this house, I will not remain here to be insulted daily." Mama Kaydee laughed. "Go! Women these days have no endurance. When you are tired of wandering, you will return." Epha packed a small bag and left, moving in with her sister. Days turned into weeks, and reality hit Kaydee hard. Without Epha, The house was chaotic. He struggled with meals, laundry, and caring for himself. His mother, for all her criticisms, did not lift a finger to help. "Mama, can you cook?" he asked one evening, exhausted from work. Mama Kelechi scoffed. "Me? Cook? I raised you. You should be able to take care of yourself." Regret settled deep in Kelechi's heart. He realized how much he had taken Epha for granted. To make matters worse, Mama Kelechi took it upon herself to find her son a proper wife, one who would be obedient, respectful, and, most importantly, under her control. She paraded a string of young women before him, each carefully selected to fit her idea of the perfect daughter-in-law. The first was Amina, a stunning young woman with delicate features and a soft-spoken nature. She was the epitome of grace, always lowering her gaze when speaking and offering to help around the house without being asked. Mama Kelechi was certain she would be the perfect choice. But after just a week in the household, Amina packed her bags and left without looking back. When Kelechi found her at the gate, she shook her head, her voice laced with disappointment. "I thought you were a strong man," she said. "But you let your mother rule over you like a boy. I cannot live like this." Next was Chika, an ambitious banker who carried herself with confidence and intelligence. Unlike Amina, she wasn't one to shrink under pressure. She met Mama Kelechi's sharp tongue with polite but firm responses, unwilling to be bullied. But after 2 days, she too was gone. She called Kelechi from the safety of her apartment, her tone clipped. "I don't know what kind of life you're living, Kelechi, but I refuse to be a puppet in your mother's house. If you ever grow a backbone, call me. Until then, lose my number." Even Kechi, the traditional village girl Mama Kelechi was sure would be the ideal candidate, didn't last. She arrived with humility, greeting Mama Kelechi with a deep curtsy and calling her Nne with reverence. She was hardworking, eager to please, and never raised her voice. Yet, by the end of the first week, she was gone too. As she balanced her single suitcase on her head and prepared to leave, she gave Kelechi one final piece of advice. "No man is worth this kind of suffering," she said simply. "Your mother does not want a wife for you, she wants a servant. And as long as you let her rule your home, you will never have peace." One by one, they walked out of his life. And each time, Mama Kelechi scoffed, shaking her head in disapproval. "These modern girls have no patience," she would mutter. "No respect for tradition." But Kelechi was beginning to see the truth. His mother wasn't looking for a wife for him. She was looking for another woman to control. Kelechi watched in disbelief as every woman his mother introduced to him rejected the very life his mother had been imposing on Epha. It dawned on him that the problem was never Epha, it was his mother. Then came the moment of reckoning. One evening, Kelechi came home exhausted. He had had a long day at work and just wanted a peaceful evening. Instead, he was met with his mother's nagging voice. "Have you thought about getting married again? That girl from the market would make a fine wife." Kelechi groaned. "Mama, please, not tonight." "Nonsense. A man cannot live without a wife." "Mama," he said, his patience snapping. "Do you know how many women have run away from this house because of you? Do you know how miserable you have made my life?" Mama Kelechi gasped, shocked by his words. Kelechi sighed deeply, rubbing his temples as the weight of the moment settled on him like an unbearable burden. His mother sat across from him, her once commanding presence now reduced to nervous fidgeting. But he had made up his mind. There was no turning back. Epha was never the problem, he said, his voice steady but weary. You were. Mama Kelechi gasped, her hand clutching her chest as if the words had struck her physically. Me? Your own mother? Yes, Mama, Kelechi said, his eyes burning with unshed tears. I have watched my marriage crumble under your interference. I have seen the woman I love, your daughter-in-law, suffer in silence because she dared to want respect in her own home. And I stood by, excusing your actions, telling myself it was just how things were. But no more. Mama Kelechi shook her head. I raised you, Kelechi. I sacrificed everything for you. And now, you cast me aside for a woman who… Enough. His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. I will always take care of you. You will never lack, but not under this roof. If I want my life back, if I want my family back, you need to leave. The silence that followed was thick, heavy with unspoken words. Tears welled in Mama Kelechi's eyes, but she saw something in her son's gaze that she had never seen before, an unshakable resolve. Kelechi did not wait for another protest. The decision had been made. That evening, Kelechi gripped the steering wheel tightly as he drove across town, his mind a storm of emotions. The city lights blurred in his vision, his heart hammering against his ribs with every mile that brought him closer to Epha. He rehearsed his words over and over, but nothing seemed good enough. What could he say to undo the pain he had caused? When he finally pulled up to Epha's sister's house, he hesitated for a moment, staring at the door as though it held his fate behind it. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out of the car and knocked. His palms were sweaty, his throat dry. Seconds stretched into eternity before the door swung open. There she stood. Epha. Her face was expressionless, her eyes unreadable. Cold, distant, guarded. The woman who once greeted him with warmth and laughter now regarded him as a stranger. A man she could no longer trust. His chest tightened. He had done this. Without thinking, he dropped to his knees right there on the doorstep, his pride forgotten, his voice raw with desperation. Please come back, he pleaded, his gaze searching hers. I understand now. I see what you went through. I should have protected you. I should have put you first. I failed you, Epha, and I am so sorry. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with regret. Epha didn't move. She folded her arms, her lips pressing into a thin, skeptical line. There was no anger in her eyes, but neither was there forgiveness. Only exhaustion. She let out a slow breath. And your mother? Kelechi swallowed hard. He had known this question would come. He had dreaded it, but he was ready. Lifting his gaze to meet hers, he let her see the determination burning in his eyes. I have made it clear to her, if she cannot respect you, she cannot stay in our home. Silence. Epha searched his face, looking for hesitation, for doubt, for any sign that he was saying what he thought she wanted to hear. But for the first time in a long time, she saw something different in Kelechi. Conviction. A man willing to fight for what he had taken for granted. Still, words were not enough. She exhaled sharply, tilting her head as if weighing her next words. We'll see, she finally said. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't love. But it was a start. For the first time since he arrived, Epha's expression softened, but skepticism still lingered. She had heard words before. What she needed was action. You want me to come back? She asked slowly. Then prove it. I will do anything. Hire a housekeeper first, she said, before I return home. And for the next month, you will handle everything, cooking, cleaning, taking care of the children. I need to see proof that life for me will be different. That you will truly share the weight of this marriage. Kelechi swallowed hard. It would not be easy, but he had already lost too much. Epha was giving him a chance, a test of his sincerity. And he would not fail. He reached for her hand, grasping it gently. I'll do it, Epha. Whatever it takes. Just come home. She didn't smile, didn't leap into his arms. Instead, she nodded once. We'll see. For the first time in a long time, Kelechi had hope. Kelechi agreed without hesitation. The next day, he hired a housekeeper. For the next month, he continued managing the home alone, truly understanding that running a household was not just a woman's duty, but a full-time responsibility that required teamwork. When the month passed, Epha finally returned home. The children ran to her, hugging her tightly. The house was spotless, the children were happy, and for the first time, she saw her husband as a partner, not just a man who expected everything to be done for him. That was how Kelechi learned a valuable lesson. Marriage is a partnership that requires teamwork, empathy, and shared responsibilities. Pride, neglect, and external interference can destroy a home, while listening, respect, and mutual support strengthen it. Women should not be overburdened with household duties alone, and seeking help is not a sign of weakness. Managing a home is demanding, and we should always appreciate the efforts of others. Mama Kelechi, upon hearing this, was furious. But she had met her match. Kelechi stood firm, choosing his wife over her unreasonable demands. Realizing she had lost control, she left in anger, vowing never to interfere again. When Epha returned, Kelechi made good on his promise. Their home was no longer a battlefield, but a place of love and respect. And for the first time, Epha felt like she truly belonged. The lesson was clear: marriage is a partnership, and no one, not even a mother-in-law, should come between a husband and wife. Respect and boundaries are key to a happy home.